If you'll turn with me now to 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings, the 18th chapter. I'm going to be reading from Eugene Peterson's translation entitled The Message. Beginning with verse 36, the word of the Lord is as follows. When it was time for the sacrifice to be offered, Elijah the prophet came up and prayed, "O God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, make it known right now that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant and that I am doing what I'm doing under your orders. Answer me, God. Oh, answer me and reveal to this people that you are God, the true God, and that you are giving these people another chance at repentance." Immediately the fire of God fell and burned up the offering, the wood, the stones, the dirt, and even the water in the trench. All the people saw it happen and fell on their faces in awed worship, exclaiming, "God is the true God. God is the true God." Elijah told them, "Grab the Baal prophets. Don't let one get away." They grabbed them. Elijah had them taken down to the brook Kishon, and they massacred the lot. Elijah said to Ahab, "Up on your feet, eat and drink, celebrate. Rain is on the way. I hear it coming." Ahab did it, got up and ate and drank. Meanwhile, Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bowed deeply in prayer, his face between his knees. Then he said to his young servant, "On your feet now. Look toward the sea." He went, looked, and reported back, "I don't see a thing." "Keep looking," said Elijah, 7 times if necessary. And sure enough, the 7th time he said, "Oh yes, a cloud, but very small, no bigger than someone's hand, rising out of the sea. Quickly then, on your way. Tell Ahab, saddle up and get down from the mountain before the rain stops you." Things happen fast. The sky grew black with wind-driven clouds, and then a huge cloudburst of rain with Ahab hightailing it in his chariot for Jezreel. And God strengthened Elijah mightily, pulling up his robe, tying it around his waist. Elijah ran in front of Ahab's chariot until they reached Jezreel. Thus far, the word of the Lord. You may be seated. I want to deal with today lessons in the miraculous. I had the unique privilege of serving under the prophetic ministry of Elijah. You're not given my name. That's not important. You're not given that I was the son of so-and-so from the town of so-and-so. No, none of that. Because that's really not important. It's not important for you to know my name. It's important for you to hear my testimony. There were experiences that I had serving and learning from Elijah. And while Elijah taught me much, a lot of what I learned was what I caught just from being around him. You know, as I look back, I caught more from Elijah than Elijah didactically taught me. And such is the benefit of having a mentor, having a role model with whom you can spend time, or just being in the atmosphere of good people. Just by hanging around the right people, you're able to catch some things. They're not necessarily writing something on a board or posting something, but because you're just around them, you're able to catch stuff from them. And I caught a whole lot just being around Elijah. I had to stay around because you never knew when he'd drop a nugget or when God would just bust a move that would literally blow my mind. stretch my faith, and alter the trajectory of my life. The text before you today is one of those occasions. You've been examining Elijah's life and ministry. And to fully understand this current episode, let's go back to what you've already covered. You started in 1 Kings chapter 17, where Elijah comes on the scene like Dirty Harry, making this declaration: as surely as the Lord my God lives, there will be no dew or rain for the next years until I give the word. And with that, rain and dew disappeared, because God was trying to show that he was God alone. God then took Elijah on field ed experience, where Elijah would know beyond the shadow of a doubt that God alone is God. He directs Elijah to the brook called Cherith, where God has ravens feed him meat and bread while he drank from a spring. And when the brook dried up and the ravens stopped coming, God sent Elijah to Zarephath, the very center of Baal worship, where God instructed a widow to feed him. However, when he got there, the widow was preparing a last meal for her son and she were going to eat, and then they would die. But God prompted Elijah to challenge the woman to bake him a cake first and watch God provide. The woman obeyed, and God supernaturally provided, such there was always enough, not just for Elijah and the widow, but also for her whole family, with something left over. In the very heart of Baal worship, God showed himself to be the God who is more than enough. And then sometime later, when the widow's son became ill and died, God revealed his authority over death. That was chapter 17. And then chapter 18 rolls around, and it opens up 3 years later. And it's in that chapter that's where my story with Elijah begins, because Elijah shows up to confront the king and our people in terms of we need to make up our minds and decide who's God. Listen to Elijah again showing up like Clint Eastwood again. How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him. We were trying to have it both ways. We needed to make a decision to push the issue. Elijah set up a challenge. The prophets of Baal and of Jezebel, numbering 850, were to build an altar, select an oxen, sacrifice it, and call on the name of their God. And Elijah would do the same, and whichever answered by fire, that would be God. Man, that was something to see. This solitary prophet taking on 850 so-called prophets of Baal. They built their altar, they slew their oxen, they called on the name of Baal from morning until the evening sacrifice. Nothing happened. Then Elijah rebuilt an old altar, slew the oxen, cut it up in pieces, put the oxen on the altar, and then he had us go down to the Kishon Springs, which miraculously still had some water. Had us fill up these containers and had us go there 3 times, such that we poured the water over the altar, and the water absorbed. I mean, it soaked the altar, it soaked the sacrifice, and then it filled up a trench that Elijah had dug that was 3 gallons deep. And Elijah called on God, and God answered. Fire came down, licked up everything. We fell on our faces and declared, God alone is God. Whoa, that was something. And then Elijah took those prophets of Baal. He said, gather up all the prophets of Baal. And he had us take them down to the Kishon Spring, and he had us kill them. Wow. Now that was something too. 850 prophets of Baal had to be eliminated. Why? Because when God reveals that he alone is God, pretenders have to go. When God shows himself in sovereign power, anything that tries to frustrate that message alone has to be put to death. And from that day on, I hitched my wagon to Elijah because I saw what God was doing in, with, and through him. And so I positioned myself because I needed to learn some things from him. And I even learned lessons in the miraculous. Ahab at that time was feeling a little dejected and strange because he's got to go back and tell his wife Jezebel that her prophets are dead. What's he going to do? So he's feeling a little dejected, scared to go home. And Elijah tells Ahab, get up on your feet, eat, drink, and celebrate. Rain is on the way. Elijah says he hears rain is coming. Elijah announces to Ahab that he hears something coming that hasn't been heard for 3 years. Elijah hears what's coming. And perhaps that's the first lesson that I learned in the miraculous is that God will make you hear something before you see something. God made Elijah hear rain before seeing rain. He not only heard rain before he saw rain, but he also proclaimed rain before he saw rain. You see, the miraculous never starts with what you see. It always starts with what you hear. God spoke to Elijah. Now you gotta go back. God spoke to Elijah about no rain or dew falling, except by his word, and Elijah declared it, and the people saw it. God told Elijah to go to the brook Cherith where ravens would feed him. Elijah heard it, obeyed God, and then he saw ravens feed him. Elijah heard God tell him, go to Zarephath where a widow would feed him. Elijah heard it, obeyed it, and met the widow. Elijah told the widow to bake the cake to him first, and she and her son would have plenty. The widow heard it, obeyed it, and then saw God's provision. When the widow's son died, Elijah said, bring the boy to me, took him up to the room. The widow heard it. Elijah prayed to God. God raised the boy, and the widow saw her son brought back to life. And now here we are 3 years later, Ahab and all of Israel, God shows himself to be God by the consuming fire because God told Elijah, now show up. And every time God made Elijah hear something before he saw something. Friends, with no storm in sight, God makes Elijah hear the sound of a storm, and Elijah hears the sound and declares it. He announces it. He vocalizes it. He speaks externally what he's heard internally. He speaks those things that are not as though they already were. God will make you hear something before you see something. You'll hear it in the spirit before you ever see it in the flesh. Which means when you hear God speak it to you in the spirit, God is alerting you to what you will see in the flesh. Now, I've got to emphasize one point. God made Elijah to hear something before Elijah saw something. And the reason why I need to make that real clear is because there may be many things that you hear that may sound godly, but not God. Not everything that you hear that is even good is from God. And so one way that you know that it is God making you to hear something is that God speaks in continuance and in congruity with his work in your life. There it is. It's right there. Elijah does not say he's heard the sound of fire. He does not say that he's heard the sound of snow. He said, I've heard the sound of rain. And why is that important? Because that was in continuance and congruity with what God had been up to in Elijah's life. 3 years earlier, God led Elijah to say that from that point on, there would be no rain except by his word. And for over 3 years, there was neither dew nor rain, because for 3 years, Elijah didn't speak rain. And Elijah didn't speak rain because he hadn't heard God say rain. Now, 3 years later, with God making Elijah to hear the sound of rain, Elijah is empowered to speak what he knows to be God. And friends, that's why it pays to know God's voice for yourself, because God will always speak in continuance and congruity with what he has done and said in your life. God will speak in complementarity, and God will speak in supplementarity to a previous word or a previous work in you. And that's why when you go through experiencing God, that Bible study, and you start talking about and dealing with the spiritual markers of your life, it is to help you come to terms with the ways in which God uniquely speaks and reveals himself to you, so that you will know when God is talking. Before God lets you see something, he'll make you hear something. Friends, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Elijah heard the sound of rain, and he announced it to Ahab. Because what Elijah heard wasn't simply for Elijah. There are times, yes, of private revelation when God is speaking to you just for you. There are things that God will share with you that are just for your hearing and nobody else's. But then there are times when God speaks to you and it's not just for you. It's for other people. And so Elijah, having heard God say rain, understands that this isn't just for Elijah. This is also for Ahab. And so he tells Ahab, get up, eat, and drink, and celebrate, because rain is coming. What you need is coming. What you've been praying for is coming. When God blesses you to hear what's coming, you need to celebrate just by hearing that it's coming. He says, get up, eat, drink, and celebrate, because I hear the sound of rain. Not that it's raining, but you need to celebrate the fact that I just hear something is coming. And friends, that's what God would have you understand. Sometimes you need to just celebrate the fact that you hear that something is coming. It's the celebration of expectation. It's the couple that's received the news that a child is on the way, and they celebrate. It's the kid or the adult with the Disney email that says your magic bands are in the mail, knowing that the magic is on the way. It's the job seeker receiving the call from HR saying that a letter of offer is on the way. It hasn't arrived, but you just heard that it was coming, and hearing that it's coming, you celebrate. I wonder, am I talking to anybody who's just heard something is coming from God? And well, if you've just heard that something is coming from God, you ought to be able to celebrate. And after Elijah tells Ahab what he tells him, Elijah goes back up to Mount Carmel and prays. That's where I saw my second lesson in the miraculous. And that is, you must get into the presence of God to be strengthened by what you've heard but don't see. You got to get into the presence of God to be strengthened by what you've heard but don't see yet. Elijah goes back up to Mount Carmel and he prays. He goes to the place where God showed himself to be God and prays. He doesn't run home. He goes back up to Mount Carmel because he does so to strengthen himself in what he's heard and spoken but has yet to see. He understood that to be firm in what he's heard and spoken but hasn't physically seen yet, he needs God to make him firm. And therefore, he goes to the place up to the mountain, Mount Carmel, where he knows God to be God and focuses on God. Friends, don't fool yourself. There is something special about the places where God chooses to make himself known. Yes, God is everywhere, but God doesn't choose everywhere to make his manifest presence known and felt. And that's why Elijah doesn't go home. He goes to Mount Carmel because Mount Carmel was where God showed up. And Mount Carmel was where God declared himself to be God. And as much as you may think that you don't need the house of God, please know this. There is a categorical difference between your house and God's house. And when it comes to the miraculous, when it comes to being made firm in what God has spoken but you haven't seen yet, you need more than what you can get at your house. You need to be able to get yourself to the place where God has designated himself to be felt and found in a powerful way. And that ain't your house, as beautiful as it may be. There is something special about the house of God where the saints of God are gathered together, the ground that God has sanctified for his name and his name alone. And I dare say that that's why somebody made their way to church today. You had to get to the mountain. You needed to get to some ground that was holy. You couldn't stay at home and watch the computer for this one. You needed to be where God promised to meet his people. You needed to be where the fire of God showed itself. You needed to be in the midst of the people who know God to be God. Elijah goes back. He goes back to Mount Carmel and he prays to God. He bends before God. He submits himself before God. And as he does so, his focus is not on what he doesn't see. It's on who is talking to him. Lord have mercy. Regardless of what he has yet to see, his ears are open to what God is making him to hear. And friends, that's important because what prayer does, it keeps you in tuned to hearing the sound when you don't see the sight. But somebody right now, God is calling you to bow before him so that he can keep you attuned to the sound, because it's hearing the sound before you see the very sight. And so with Elijah hearing the sound of a storm, Elijah tells me, go up and look towards the sea. Now we're at Mount Carmel, but you need to know there was a cliff in front of us that blocked the view to the sea. So I had to climb up even higher to get a full view of the sea. And from there, I had to look westward in order to see the Mediterranean Sea. And I did what he told me. I looked westward towards the Mediterranean Sea, but I didn't see anything. I did what he told me to do. I climbed up, I looked westward toward the sea, but I didn't see anything. And so, Gail, I told him, I don't see anything. And he just said, keep looking. He said, 7 times if necessary, keep looking. he was teaching me my third lesson in the miraculous. And that is, when directed, you must look steadfastly in the direction of the miraculous until you see what's been spoken and heard. Elijah called me to look in the direction of the sea for me to see physically what he's heard spiritually. And I did what he said, and I didn't see what Elijah heard and spoke. Now, my not seeing it didn't mean that he hadn't heard anything. It didn't mean that what he'd spoken was false. It simply meant it hadn't appeared to me yet. And that's why, without skipping a beat, Elijah just said, keep looking. 7 times if necessary. Now, you do know what 7 means. 7 is the number of completion. In other words, Elijah told me to look as long and as many times as it takes for me to see what he heard. And so I kept looking. And on the 7th time, I saw something rising on the sea. Now, I don't know who this is for, but let me tell you this. When God has you look in a certain direction for what he has in mind and you don't see anything, tell your neighbor, keep looking. You keep looking until you see something. And sometimes it means looking 7 times. And other times it means multiples of 7. That means it can mean 14 times or 24 times or 28 times or 35 times or 42 times or 49 times or 343 times or 2,401 times. I just want you to know I can multiply by 7. However long that it takes, God says you keep looking, because if God made it to be heard in your spirit, you will see it in the flesh. Sooner or later, God will show you something that you've been hearing. Now, every word that I said, you got to pay attention to. Keep looking in the direction that God has spoken. Yeah. Tell your neighbor, you got to listen to all of those words. Keep looking in the direction that God has spoken. I kept looking in the direction of the sea. That means I kept looking westward. I didn't start looking eastward, because that was not the direction I had been instructed to look. I was instructed to look towards the sea, which was westward. And even when I didn't see anything westward, I didn't say, well, maybe he made a mistake, let me look eastward. No, I had to keep looking westward, because that was the direction that Elijah said, look, whose ticket did I just punch? Because somebody has been tempted to look in another direction, because the direction that God has given you, you haven't seen anything yet. But if God said, look westward, and you don't see anything yet, don't you start looking eastward. Don't you start looking southward. Don't you start looking northward. You keep looking westward. And the reason why you got to keep looking in the direction that the Lord gives you is that the enemy knows that your flesh can get weary. And the enemy understands that when your flesh is weary looking in God's direction, all he's got to do is have you look in another direction and just put anything before you, and you will take anything because you're weary, rather than waiting on what God has in mind for you. Who am I talking to right now? Am I talking to anybody right now who does not mind admitting that some of the lumps and bumps and bruises in your life life because you stopped looking in the direction that God had you look, and you started looking in other directions, and rather than looking and waiting on what God had for you, you bumped into Chucky or his bride. You bumped into Frankenstein or the Mrs. Oh, but is there anybody here who can say, I've learned enough in my life to know that I need to keep looking in the direction that God has for me? If God tells me to look towards the sea, it ain't going to be in the mountains. Somebody else's may be in the mountains, but God has mine in the sea, and that's where I'm going to keep looking. So I kept looking westward. I kept looking towards the sea. And as I kept looking towards the sea, I see this cloud. But it ain't a big cloud, it's a small cloud. It's a cloud that looks like the size of a man's hand. And so I told Elijah, I said, Elijah, I see something, but it's a cloud the size of a man's hand. And Elijah then told me to quickly get on my way to Ahab, to move, because not just rain, a storm rain is coming. And that's when I learned another lesson, and that is you need to act on the smallest piece of evidence. As I looked from a distance, I saw a cloud that looked like the size of a man's hand. That's how it looked from a distance. You see, if I was on the sea, what looked like a small hand would be recognized for the size that it really was. But from a distance, it looked like a man's hand. Any of y'all who have ever been up on an airplane know that from a distance, what's big looks small because it is from a distance. But when you get up close to it, you realize how big it really is. That's why don't be fooled by the way that things look from a distance. You need to move when things look small, because it's small to you because you're looking at it from a distance, but you need to act like it's right up on you. Because if you wait until it gets to you, it will overtake you. That's why Elijah is very specific. He says, tell Ahab, get in the chariot and start moving now, because if he waits until the rain gets here, there's going to be too much water and his chariot ain't going to work. I'm just trying to let somebody understand that if you wait until something comes to you, you won't be able to handle it as God desires for you to handle it. You won't be ready for it when it comes. What's designed to bless you will actually be a burden for you if you wait too late. I wonder, am I talking to anybody here? Is there anybody in here who said, I wish that I had taken advantage of it early, but because I waited, I was not able to take full advantage of it? If hearing the fact that certain things were going to come my way, I would have started saving earlier so I'd have the money to take advantage of the opportunity. But because I did not act when it looked small, when it was big, I was ill prepared to be able to handle it. Who am I talking to right now who sees the small cloud from a distance? Can you see the breakthrough from a distance? Can you see the turnaround from a distance? Can you catch a glimpse of God's moving from a distance? I know that it's faint from a distance, but can you see it? I know that the shape seems ill-formed from a distance, but can you see it? I know that it doesn't look like much from a distance, but can you see it? Because, friends, if you can see it as ill-shaped and ill-formed and as insignificant as it appears from a distance, it's coming in your direction. It's headed your way. See, y'all don't know when to shout. It's not the distance, my friends. It's the direction. If it's coming coming to you. It doesn't matter how it looks from a distance. It's coming in your direction. And if you can act like it from a distance, you'll maximize it up close. Something just leapt up in somebody's spirit. It may be distant, but it's coming in my direction. Is there anybody who just caught that thing and felt something? Can you give God a shout? Even if it's in a distance, it's moving in your direction. Yes, sir. My God, yeah, it was in a distance, but it was coming in my direction. Lord have mercy. You see, that's how the enemy catches us. The enemy says, oh, it's small. But the enemy says, yeah, because if I can get you not to move, Lord have mercy. If I can get you to be lackadaisical and complacent, when it actually reaches you, you won't be able to enjoy it. You won't be able to maximize it. But if you ever get free in your mind that says, regardless of how it looks, it just keeps on coming in my direction. It just keeps moving towards me. And that must mean God has something special in mind for me, because the devil can't stop it from getting to you, but he can stop you from being ready for it when it comes. Slap five with your neighbor and say, since he ain't going to stop it from getting to me, I'm going to be ready for it when it comes. I'm going to act on it now. So I went. This little small cloud, looked like a hand, but it's moving in our direction. So I went, and I told Ahab, and before I knew it, the sky got dark, and wind-driven clouds overtook us, and the heavens opened, and torrential rain fell. You see, I had to learn something else about this, and that is, you got to watch God produce an acceleration. Yeah. Elijah told me, stand on the mountain, look westward towards the sea. I stood, and long time. But then things happened fast. The storm came fast. What looked so far and so small from a distance came quickly and so heavily. It came sooner and was greater. I mean, for a while I didn't see anything. Then I saw a hand in the distance, but before I knew it, the floodgates of heaven opened and rain began to fall. That's how it is often with God. You can look and there doesn't seem to be anything. And then you look and you see something faint. But before you know it, something is upon you. Elijah told the king, hurry up before the rain stops him. The king, he got in his Escalade chariot, started moving. And then Elijah tucked his cloak, tied it around his waist, and he just started to run. Now Ahab is riding in an Escalade chariot. Elijah, all he's got is some Nikes on his feet. He starts running. But God strengthens Elijah to such a degree that Elijah, with Nikes on his feet, outruns Ahab in his Escalade chariot. That, my friends, is what you call acceleration. Because the God who holds back rain for 3 years is also the God who will bring rain with little to no warning. The God who goes agonizingly slow is also the God who goes amazingly fast. The God whose work appears to be nothing more than a small hand is the God who will bring something that nobody's hands can hold back. He is the God of the miraculous. He's the God who can strengthen you and accelerate you such that you show up where you're not supposed to show up, when you're not supposed to show up, how you're not supposed to show up, ahead of whom you're not supposed to be ahead of. He is the God who can do more with Nikes on your feet than somebody can do riding an Escalade. He's the God who, when you act on what you've heard, he empowers I was you, to be the miraculous. Lord have mercy. I learned something that day. It's one thing for you to see the miraculous. It's another thing for you to be the miraculous. The rain coming was a miracle, but Elijah running and beating Ahab and Ahab's chariot, that was a miracle all by itself. And I just want to let somebody know, God doesn't just want you to see a miracle. God wants to make you a miracle. I wonder, is there anybody that I'm talking to right now? You can say, I've seen so many miracles. I've seen the miraculous. I've seen God do the impossible. I've seen God work wonders. I've seen God do stuff that's blown my mind. But is there anybody who can say, I just haven't seen God do miracles? I am a miracle myself. Can you slap fire with somebody and say, child, yes, I've seen a miracle, but I want you to know I am a miracle. It took a miracle to make me who I am. It took a miracle to get me where I am. It took a miracle to be able to keep me as long as I've been kept. I know I might look plain, but baby, that's just the wrapping. There's a whole lot of miraculous up in me. My God, the way he's worked in my mind, the way he's worked on my heart, the way he's worked in my spirit, the way he's worked in my body. Don't take the wrapping, my God, for granted. I am a miracle myself. I am a walking, talking, shouting, praising, preaching, praying miracle. I am a project managing miracle. I am a working miracle. I am a leading miracle. I'm a traveling miracle. Everywhere I go, the miraculous shows up. Slap fire with your neighbor and say, neighbor, that's why I had to come to church. I had to come to church because God wanted somebody to know what a miracle looks like. And so here I am. The miracle. Smokey had his band called The Miracles. I may not be able to sing and dance like him, but when I lift my hands, I'm lifting my hands as a miracle. Oh, hallelujah. 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 Folk don't realize who you really are. Tell them I'm a miracle. I'm a miracle. I'm a miracle. I'm a miracle.